Hey everybody, welcome to It'sAllRealiTV.
It's all relative!
I'm your host Joe from the Bro Scouts, coming at you here for Survivor Season 33, Millennials versus Generation X. Super excited. I've been waiting for a while for Survivor just to come up again because they've been doing pretty well for the last few seasons. They've been pretty exciting, had some good characters. I mean, they've been going in and out of returning players seasons and then new ones, and just I guess trying to keep us all interested season by season. So let's start off talking about the location. First off, we're starting off in Fiji, which is the first time we've gone back since season 14, Survivor Fiji, obviously. Now, with the Millennials, if some of you may not know, they're separated by ages. So we got Millennials, which is 18 to 32, and then we have Generation X, which is 33 and upwards to about 58. Now, we have 20 castaways here instead of the normal 18, so that means we're going to have tribes of 10 and 10, and a little skeptical about it because in previous seasons and older ones, when it's been 20 castaways, usually right off the bat, two people just get immediately taken out of the game without even actually playing. So will they actually stay in the game is another question, like as a full 10 on 10. Now, other rumor mills is that this was filmed during Fiji's cyclone season, which was an interesting move on production, first of all, because it gets pretty crazy in that area. We'll see how that goes as the episode piles on. So let's start with the beginning of the episode. You know, you get the normal one where it's just the two packs of tribe members just coming in some ridiculous fashion. In this case, it's speedboats just thumping around. And, you know, we get to see some first impressions of some people that, you know, could have a good foresight on the game. First person is Taylor that we get introduced to, who reminds me a lot like Fabio, if you remember. Pretty dim-witted guy, super cool, but ended up sneaking his way through to be late in the game and then just turned it on and won it all. He's the ultimate underdog and won the whole game. Do I think he's going to win? Maybe not, just because some of his comments where he says he is like the young Peter Pan, he's done it all, had 7 jobs, even traveled to North Dakota. Yeah, he went to North Dakota. I mean, haven't been. I don't think that's a huge feat, though, especially if you live in America yourself. I could be wrong. And then we go down to our next contestant, which is Zeke. Zeke has been a fan favorite just at, like, once we got to see the casting videos. He's got a magnificent fireman stash and a great personality. During his video, he was rolling around in the mud puddle just like a little piglet. But he seems like a very entertaining guy, and I already can see him as going really far in the game, potentially winning, and not only that, but being a return player, just because he has such a good personality. Next off, we get the classic Jeff Probst move. The classic move where he just says 39 days, one survivor, and it pans out and he is on a massive island where you're like, Jeff, he totally got helicoptered there, but it doesn't matter. It's Jeff Probst. He can do what he wants. I kind of miss the old days, though, where he would just leave and with the votes at the very end and then just barrel through to New York, and you wonder how he's going to get there this time. This time they've been, I mean, lately in the last few seasons, they haven't had him do anything super ridiculous like a jet ski from Central America to New York, but we'll see how this one pans out. Hopefully it's a little interesting. So we all get them, all the castaways together. They haven't separated them up yet. No one really knows what the theme is going to be. They just think, oh, this is a new Survivor. There's all these new players. This will be fun. We get them out, and Jeff says everyone has to pick a buff based on your name. So it's not random, obviously, and we all know what's going to be. Pretty dramatic irony. Once we all figure out it's going to be Millennials versus Generation X, people are kind of stoked, especially the Generation X, because how they're perceiving Generation X is that they are like a blue collar. We've worked super hard for this entire thing. We are brawn. We're going to look down on Millennials because, you know, Millennials get a trophy for everything, and we had to walk up hills both ways. As a Millennial myself, I have to say shame on you. I have to say shame on you. And this was from Paul. Paul is casted out as the oldest player, who he is obviously then a Generation X, and said that every single millennial is grown up into a place where they get participation trophies. And that's true. I got some participation trophies, but I also didn't suck. I deserved everything I got. However, it is parents' from Generation X that are forcing coaches that say, oh, my little boy Timmy here didn't get a merit and he actually was really improved. And it's like, oh, well, we're going to give him the most improved. And then, you know, on teams where it's like 2 age groups, it's like, well, mine is brand new to the sport. And it's like, well, here goes Rookie of the Year. And they started just piling on all this stuff. So shame on you, parents. The way we act as millennials is all thanks to your teachings. So let that sit in. It's not our fault. This is just what we got. Before that, Jeff asked to call out who's the 18-year-old. You know, let's get the elephant out of the room. So Will, with the deepest voice I've ever heard an 18-year-old have, puts his hand up and says, I am still in high school. And you know what? That's pretty ballsy. Being 18, he must have a birthday in January or something. Don't really know his bio too well. That seems pretty old since I left when I was 17. But whatever, kudos to you for leaving high school and, you know, being on Survivor. I could not be more jealous. I can't go because I'm Canadian. But when Will said I left high school for this, there was the funniest moment of the episode, I would say. Someone just, I don't know which one it was, screamed out, someone's going to be getting their GED. That comment of the episode. Anyways, moving on. After Paul said his remarks, you know, other people, like say Adam, who is the homeless shelter manager, stepped up and said, well, we'll see what happens, you know, on the stomping ground. Basically called them out. It's like, you guys can think all you want, let your head get as big as possible, and we're going to pop that boat. We're going to pop it. So, first impressions, a little bit of arrogance coming from the Generation X because, you know, they think we're older, we are wiser, and we've seen it all. Whereas millennials are just being kind of open at it and just being like, you know, Survivor can be anything, and we're going to attack it head on and bring it. So my edge so far for this season is millennials. All right, so now we finally get, here are your maps. Now, first things first, just like a lot of other seasons, scattered around the area is a bunch of items for the contestants and teams to choose from. So they have 1 minute to go, and the team disperses and they pick what they want. There's fruit, machetes, pots, whatever. This case is a little different. There's 2 items where each tribe gets to choose whether they get to choose one item over the other. And there's 2 of those. So it could definitely change on how they output what's going to happen, and that could affect them and their camp life completely. So right off the bat, Generation X immediately goes for the pots and pans instead of the hammer. Seems like it makes sense because, you know, they got a cast iron pot. You can use that as a hammer in your own self. It's a multifunctional thing. And, you know, you're going to be cooking a lot. You need to provide for 10 people. You need to be able to cook a lot. So that made sense. And then they chose the fishing gear over the chickens. Now we'll talk about whether that was a good one in a sec. So then the millennials get their choice, and they take the pots and pans as well. So that is overall a good choice. And then they chose the chickens. So which is going to prove to be better? Is it going to be about 4 chickens for millennials, or is it going to be the fishing gear for the Generation X? I'm going to keep going with the millennials. Now, this isn't being biased. It's the fact that chickens constantly are producing eggs, and if they don't, you have them at their disposal to kill them off one after another. So regardless, you're going to have food. It's a low-risk idea. Fish, on the other hand, you got to go out and you got to use energy to get your own food. So, I mean, it's kind of, you got to put in your effort to do it. So that's a very Generation X thing to do, is fish, like it provides a lot of protein. So does chicken and eggs. So hats off to the millennials on that choice, especially when you only have 1 minute to decide it. So they had a minute to win it. Yeah, a minute to win it. Okay, so as all this chaos is going on, there's one thing, though, that Generation X players did have over the millennials. Millennials, typical running and just grabbing whatever they can and just running and dropping it. Actually, you saw a lot of fruit explode because they're just throwing it and everything. But what was left behind was someone picked up a bunch of fruit and just ran, and it dropped looked like to be an idle clue. And none other than Jessica from the Generation X team came up and went, oh, a clue, and pocketed it and continued on. So hats off to her for just like standing back, seeing the situation and approaching correctly. That's all you gotta really do. In my opinion, patience is the biggest thing about Survivor and how you go ahead in this game. So as they're just about to leave to go towards their beaches, Jeff warns them that this is the cyclone season of Fiji, and that there could be a lot of storms ahead of them. So he's like, don't mess around, get a shelter. Like, he's told people in previous seasons, like, yeah, you got to get a shelter or else it's going to be uncomfortable. Like, this one seems more, he's like, you got to do it or you're going to be in a whole lot of trouble and we're probably going to have to step in. And when Jeff has to step in, it usually has a huge cost or you're just done. Like, it's not going to happen. Jeff being on camp is terrible. It's never good news. When has he ever had good news when he comes there? Like, oh, instead, everyone's a winner. No, someone's getting axed. So we're going to pan into the very first camp, all right? And it goes to the Millennials. And it seems like they're all hands on deck, being very, like, blue-collar, working hard to get priority number one, which is the shelter. They listened to the first thought they got told, which was from Jeff. And in that moment, while everything's getting together, usually you see the brutisher people come together and start thinking. So during that time, you see, like, the boys, Taylor and Jay, form bromance, it's looking like, which looks, that's pretty good. Like, you want to have your ride or die type of person, and with a surfer like dude finding another Aussie like guy, it's gonna mesh. So I have a feeling like we're potentially gonna have something like the Three Amigos from season Fans versus Favorites 2, just like Eddie and Reynolds out of these two. That's pretty good. Now, is there gonna be someone else that's gonna be like Malcolm that's gonna come in the picture? But it gets more interesting, and it seems to be a bit more deja vu. Where Figgy and Michelle now are starting to get hunted by those two lads. So they're coming in, and they're talking and starting to flirt, and now this is where it's getting too much like deja vu.
What did you just say?
Because they're now being the cool young people, and, there's 4 of them, but they're calling themselves the Triforce. Whatever. And it just is way too much of like, are you guys not fans? Did you not see what happened here before? You're going to get pointed out. It's going to be too much like a clique thing that you're going to create, and you're going to isolate yourself from the older people, which actually there's 6 people versus 4 now, and you're going to be in trouble pretty quick. So you better not lose, or you better be very coy about your foursome right there. So let's leave that on the table for a little bit. My biggest question after my first impression when you see the Millennials arriving on their camp is it pans to Zeke. Now, Zeke is on the older side, where it kind of gets to the bracket of between Millennials and Generation X. So you got to wonder, can he connect with this younger crowd? It seems like he's a very open book kind of person where he'll tell you straight to his face. He's like, I'm super going to be diva. Don't worry about it. And you know what? I'm going to slit your throat. I get a lot of Richard Hatch out of this guy, but I don't think he's going to sound so arrogant about it. But he's going to be very happy and insulting at the same time, I feel. But I'm pulling for Zeke. I love Zeke. Okay, so now we go to the first impression on Generation X's beach. And, Paul, the oldest guy that called out the Millennials, first thing they get back to camp, starts calling them out again, starts, raising his chest out and starts talking down on the Millennials. But my man Ken just comes roaring in and said, guys, first thing you got to do is not underestimate our opponents, because we're gonna let it get to our heads and they'll win. They're strategic. We're all brute. We work hard, but they are thinkers. Like, these are the people that are creating all these further technologies. So fair play to you, Ken. Actually, you're one of my favorites to win. I think you'll go far if you can just keep your shirt on or some pants on once in a while. Like, you really like just showing off your cheddar grating abs. But fair play to you. So now we pan into Jessica, and she wanders off and talk about, like, what advantage did she just get? Was it an advantage? Was it a clue? So she opens it up, and it's not an idol clue. So that really wonders, are there idols going to be in this season at all? Are they? Or are they leaving them so you don't have them too early in the game, so then it's not going to screw up a good click early on? So then the end results between Generation X and other alliances will be far greater. It actually turns out to be something called the Legacy Advantage. Now, the Legacy Advantage is basically a long-term advantage that you have to wait for until day 36. And if you do so and make it that far, you get a further advantage. But the problem is you're not going to get anything until day 36, and you have to make it. But if you don't, you have to give up your advantage to someone else. And I'm guessing you're going to have to do it publicly when you get voted out. So you're going to have to give it to someone, and that's publicly going to put a target on someone. So that's a very interesting thing. I wonder what's going to happen. So basically what it's saying is we now have an advantage that goes in between when idols aren't going to be an advantage. So I wonder how that's going to happen and what it's going to be. Okay, we go back to the Millennials, and it's just like I thought. Figgy starts saying, or Jessica, known as Figgy, starts going off and saying how she's a flirt, she can get guys wrapped around her finger, she'll use it and manipulate guys. Basically, I'm hoping that she's going to turn into like a Poverty case, because Poverty was one of the best females to ever play this game, period. So let's see if she's able to do that and, you know, wrap Taylor around her finger. That would be very smart of her. But now we get to see something, like it goes straight away from Figgy and everything after they solidify their alliance. That goes to Hannah. She is very stressed out to be the first one out because she just socially looks like she's an outcast, because she's identifying the cliques. You got the cool people and you got the older people, and then you got me, this young person that doesn't look fantastic. Kind of looks like a morph of, you know, Debbie and Aubrey put together, and you know she's worried about being the first one out. So she runs to Michelle. And Michelle thinks, I can get her to trust me and I can use her. So that's actually a pretty good play by Hannah. So kudos to Hannah. I think she just got into the coolest people group. Now, we're back to Generation X. Rachel, being the author but also was a Playboy model, is being very over the top when trying to help. Like, she's working hard, you know, she's digging the sand for the post to go in and everything, working with Brett and Paul and everything, and starts making comments that were just a little over the top. She's just like got a big mouth. I just don't think she knows what to do or what to say in this situation with people she doesn't know. So I think it's just word vomit that's coming out of her mouth. But you can already see like that people are getting already testy with her on day one, and you never ever want to step on people's toes, especially if it's an annoyance, because then you're cast out number one. So Rachel's got to be careful if she doesn't want to be the first one out. But then there's David. I have high hopes for David. I think that he'll be really great just because he looks super socially awkward. And he looks like that dude from I Love You Man and Superbad, forget his name. Oh my gosh, it's going to kill me. But he looks like a relative of him. But he was a cartoon writer for, you know, Family Guy. And one of my favorite shows, Malcolm in the Middle. Not a cartoon, but still was a writer for it. And it seems like he'll be very humorous, a very comedic aspect of this tribe, which could get people to like him. However, early on, you know, he's running around being super paranoid, so he's got to really set the tone down, be quiet, speak when necessary, and be very smart with what you say, and maybe you can gain someone's trust, right? And even if you don't, if you're just saying something that is just like being funny and someone can feel comfortable around you, they will likely not want to vote you out. But if you're running around being paranoid, you are going to be public enemy number one. So we got two people of an idea based on the edit that are going to maybe already be on the chopping block should Generation X lose the first immunity challenge. Now, while David is really worried and paranoid, obviously thinking strategically like idols, going around and running, it seems like a lot of other people that are playing aren't too worried about game stuff. They just want to get, you know, their first priority done, which is shelter and just getting things working around camp done, which has like been an old type of survivor playstyle since like the early on days. Like people would just be like, we work hard and we'll game later. Unfortunately, the new school way is game now and let the people that are thinking that you can game later burn themselves out and build everything for you. So we'll see how this goes together. Like, will Dave be able to gain some trust and just be like being the mastermind and the puppet master behind the entire tribe? So I can't wait to see how that goes. So Millennials probably worked for a good couple of hours on a pretty crappy shelter and then thought it was party time for everyone to get together, bond, and go into the beach. Yeah, it didn't work out. So they made probably the crappiest shelter known to history when in a Cyclone series. Made a crappy shelter in a Cyclone season of a climate. And you know what? You really should have gotten it done the very first time. And, you know, oh no, look, it's really dark out now. You have no shelter. And look, there's a storm. It was what they made was so pitiful because when you sat on it with maybe more than 2 or 3 people, it started to break. Your ass starts going through the bamboo. I don't know about you, but bamboo's fucking strong. Sorry about my language, but like it's really strong. Like, but it's just fun's over, kidlets. You gotta just get in survivor mode, get it done, get your very first thing done, and then the rest of the game will be cake. Because if you don't have a shelter, you're going to get tired, you're going to get dehydrated because you're not going to get any sleep, and then you're going to come to challenges, you're going to burn yourself out, and next thing you know, you're going to get evacuated. So get shelter done on this season, is what Jeff said. He wasn't messing around. Generation X, a little bit of a leg up. They do have a shelter, but it was leaky as heck. So they woke up all pruny and everything. So it's not like they're in better shape. However, they had something to lie down on. So it's not looking good for either or, especially after the first impressions. Okay, so we're getting now to the next day, and neither tribe has a good enough shelter fit. So what do they get? They got their very first tree mail. Usually it has to indicate about, welcome to Survivor, this is going to be your first challenge. However, what this was is no one has a good shelter. It's leaky. We're in the cyclone stuff. We told you, here's a tarp, and you get it until, you're able to make your own one, and then you give it back to me, and if not, there'll be consequences. So that's telling you something from production that, hey, we came to a place, it's a lot worse than we thought, we're going to help you now, don't abuse it. So clearly something's going to happen as far as a storm or something, because they can see the forecast, these guys can't. And that was the first time ever that a tarp has just been lent to them on a periodic time. So there's going to be a lot of firsts, I think, in this season, especially for assistance from production, because it's been getting iffy. Like last season, there was almost 3 medical evacuations on one challenge where Caleb got airlifted out. So, I mean, it seems like things are getting dangerous with their locations. So they might have to be a bit more careful with where they're picking Survivor to be for, the seasons per country. So we have to be a little bit mindful on that Survivor production. Okay, so we're back at the Millennials, and they start actually caring about the shelter now and going full tilt on it. Now, this is only thanks to Zeke. I gotta give it to Zeke. He went out of his comfort zone and said, you know what, I am going to be the key person. I'm going to lead and make them build a shelter. Even though my day-to-day lifestyle is not building anything, it's riding a SkyTrain in Brooklyn. So kudos to you on being a leader. And not to mention, he just made shelter. He made fire. So good for Zeke. I actually really think that he definitely answered my question before. Can he fit in? Most definitely, and he's going to be more liked. Because if you're able to lead, but with success, you can go far because you're gaining people's trust. If you try and lead early on and fail, people want you out because they're annoyed that it didn't work out because they wasted their best energy. Now, this is where it gets really interesting though. Aside from everyone working hard, both sides, Generation X and Millennials, on their shelters, Jeff Probst makes a visit to each tribe and says, guys, this is worse than we thought. Cyclone's coming. It's a full-blown, we need to evacuate. Take all your things and we're going. Which has never been done before. We've had medical evacuations. We've never had the entire cast be evacuated. So that was like, wow, this is going to be tough. So he evacuates them all, and then out of nowhere, like, it pans back to what they say is the day after, and it's all sunny and looks like everything's a wreck. Like the shelters were blown over, so clearly someone could have gotten very injured. So that was really good on production, just to say, you know what, we're taking them out. Safety can't be compromised right now. So rumor mill is because John Cochran had an interview saying that, this storm actually cut back 2 weeks. It destroyed Tribal, it destroyed a lot of challenges. It took them back 2 weeks. So did they actually have to wait in a protected area for 2 weeks? Now, did that 2 weeks involve them sleeping comfortably, eating comfortably, and everything like that? Or was that just like the production had to go full tilt and make up 2 weeks worth of work? So it doesn't really indicate how many days it really took, and they didn't say anything. It didn't say day 3. It didn't say whatever. It just was like, oh, it's morning. We assume that it's the next day. So I really wonder how many days it took to actually film this entire thing. All right, so we started off with the Generation X, now back to work, and David is really trying. He is opening up to the ladies, talking about his fears. He's afraid of anything, hoping to get some kind of leverage and like maybe sympathy, so people feel like he's opening up, that they can trust him. But he's getting a really interesting first edit where he's like, I'm super afraid, I'm super paranoid, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm pretty sporadic. People can't trust me because I'm going to be kind of like Tony, but not in the finesse that Tony had. Like, Tony was very paranoid, but he was usually right about this. David is just paranoid because he's out of his complete element right now. And, he's trying to turn it around, which we'll only see if he lasts past this episode, really, because he's a bit of a disaster by its edit. And because he's going paranoid, he just says, screw it, I'm going to start looking for an idol, which is a good case to go for if you're like Ty, but just like Ty, he gets straight up caught by almost everyone, and becomes public enemy number one, which paints a target quickly on his back that people are like, I can't trust him, he's very paranoid. It's a tough thing. You don't do it blatantly obvious in front of camp. You go off and find it in a tree and you say, I'm going to the washroom or anything like that. He didn't do any of that. So I'm very intrigued to see how his edit pans out. Now, we are back with the Millennials, and Hannah is being very, very perspective, more so and more so as this episode goes on. She is sitting back, staying cool, and then watching the cool people versus the nerds. And he sees basically the three people. We see Taylor, Jay, and Fiji making the Triforce symbol as if they are, together, super kumbaya. And she's seeing that, which obviously is going to freak someone out. And then it goes and tags it with Mari, which is a great move, because Mari, I think, is going to go really far on this. Hasn't had much to say in this episode so far at all, but you know what? That's a good person to tag out with. She's a social butterfly. Also seems like she's very active too, because she did ballet, not to mention. So it's a good pick. And I think now they're starting to collect up the other four slowly to take out the cool players. So like I said, it's a very deja vu type of thing.
Nothing, just had a little deja vu
thing, like fans versus favorites too. Because you got to get out the cool people, the people that are isolating yourself from the team, because they don't care if we win or lose because we got R4. But you know what? That's a minority in this case, guys. Okay, we're going to jump to the first immunity challenge of the season, and this is very exciting. So they get there and they have to immediately give back their tarps because fun time's over. So for this challenge, it has a bit of physicality, very little bit, but more strategy, because how it works is there's multiple stages. You crawl under a bunch of wood and get your whole team there, and you now have a choice of going a long route or you take a shortcut. If you take a shortcut, you take them out and you smash the tiki mask. And if you do that, that adds on 10 more pieces to your puzzle at the very end, and there's two options to choose, a shortcut or a long cut. So right off the bat, the Generation X is going full tilt because, we're not losing to these dang kids. And they go there and they immediately are saying, we're going to come like a shotgun right off the gun. They're going to hit and do shortcut number one. While as the Millennials are slow, but they get through and they go through the long cut. Very smart, because now they already have a 10-piece advantage on their puzzle. So they could probably get it done quicker. Generation X comes back in and then immediately goes to the other shortcut. So now they have a total of 60 tiles in their puzzle to assemble. Now, I don't know if they've watched the show very often, but their puzzles are pretty in-depth, so you want as less as possible. So by the time Millennials have caught up by doing all the long cuts, well, they take one shortcut, my bad. They take one shortcut, so it's 50 tiles to 60 tiles. And once they catch up to do the puzzle, we have a matchup of Michelle and Figgy going against David and Rochelle. And Rochelle's boobs are basically flopped out. It's pretty hilarious. But you think David has a chance to redeem himself being on the puzzle, and Michelle and Figgy, they're just wanting to go on there. Like, it doesn't really say that, they didn't say at all that they were puzzle people. So we got it going, and David and Rochelle, like after maybe a couple of seconds, aren't getting anywhere, and they switch out and put Jessica and Sunday to come in. At that point, it is almost too late for it to go, and the Millennials win. just because they had less tiles. Like, I mean, if they took both shortcuts, would it be the same? Maybe, because it just seemed like Figgy and Michelle jived really well with this puzzle, but who would know? So Millennials proved Paul wrong. That's what you get. Yeah, it was an exciting win. They killed the puzzle, whereas Generation X just didn't really know what was going on. So, of course, because Generation X lost, the very first thing to do is the brutish-like people is to be like, okay, nothing happened with the puzzle. You guys are on the chopping block. So how it's being perceived is that Dave and Rachel are now on the chopping block. Shame on you guys, though, because Generation X thought that they would win because of pure experience. So that, you know, can try to warn you guys and say, please don't underestimate these guys. They're all mental. And you know what? They beat you in a mental competition. So hats off to Millennials again. Now we're going to cut to David right now, and he's trying to really clear the air with, you know, Brett, Sunday, and Jess, because those three, along with Chris, are really tight in the water, just hanging out, chatting about strategy. And David's from afar saying, I'm seeing all these people talk strategy, and I'm outside of it. And in Survivor, you never want to be on the outside of the conversations. You always at least want to be inside it so you understand where the votes are going, and then maybe you can plant some seeds to get that vote to go how you want. So then you are slowly building a case, being like, well, this was my move, this was my move, this was my move. So David goes in there and clears the air because he knows exactly what's happening. He is on the chopping block. So there has to be one more person that's going to be there, which is Rochelle. So he's going to be there, and they ask him straight up, do you have an idol? And he's like, no. And the case is he doesn't. He really doesn't. He hasn't been playing Survivor very well. But they don't believe him when he says, no, I don't have any, because, you know, he's been very paranoid. And, you know, that's what happens when you're acting as you are very early in the game, because they only have so much impressions to go off of you off. So if you're being very paranoid at the very start, chances are there's not a lot of redeeming stuff because you have only had one challenge under your belt. So from that case, they still believe that David has an idol. So they want to split the votes between him and one other person, potentially Cece or Rachel, probably Rachel. And that can be iffy, especially with there's 10 people, you know, and you only have a core of 4 people that you actually are diehard trust. You think you can get them more people, like 2 more people, and you'll be fine. But if someone catches wind that you're splitting the votes, all they need to do is get 4 votes. So if David matches up with Rachel or whatever, they just need 2 more votes to swing their way, and all they have to do is pay attention on who are they not talking to, and then they can flop that vote. So is that going to happen at all? Well, we're here and we're at Tribal now. They're first going to do some stuff where they're looking like, it's been a while now that I've noticed that Rachel has some kind of red eye going on, and apparently during the whole cyclone that was happening, sand is getting brushed up and everything. Like, even during one of the interview type of things that they have, it even looked like Rachel was going to get swept off of her feet and fly away like Mary Poppins. So she said sand got in her eye and it caused a bacterial infection. Yikes, you are in trouble eventually. Like, that is not good. Infection in Survivor never means anything good, especially early on, because then it has time to colonize, and it, especially in your eye, you don't want to mess around with your eye. So I think she has potential. If it doesn't get better, she should get, like, evacuated. That's something that shouldn't be tested with. Now we jump to David, and people are saying first off on his impression, like, it wasn't him, that he is afraid of everything. You know what? Now that it's starting to progress, that everyone's saying he's afraid of everything and all that stuff, he could play off that character, that he is afraid of everything. He's a little sporadic, but has to have some kind of loyalty to someone, so then people will underestimate him, and that gives him opportunity and breathing room to be a bit more strategic, and then create another voting block that he can move around with while he's part of the main group. So I really hope he busts something out like that, because the ground is laid out for him to do something like that. And he's, like I'm saying, he even admits to Jeff saying, I am my own enemy. No one else is causing problems but myself. And so he's cleaning the slate as much as possible. So I think this was like a trial day for him, and now he's going to kill it. But we'll see. We'll see. So speaking of that, Cece talks for the very first time, pretty much. Like she, just nodded her head and talked a little bit, on the mat early on when Paul was saying his antics about trophies and everything like that. But this is like the first time that she's actually getting some good screenshot, and she doesn't really talk about much other than paranoia. And then, we do the classic who's all paranoid that they're going to get voted off. And, you're not going to be silly and be the only one that puts your hand down. Everyone puts their hands up. It makes sense. But then it finally goes to Rachel, and she gets her chance to talk because Jeff has to switch it because he knows who is on the chopping block. He's got to get Rachel to speak a little bit now that they got David to speak. And she is apologizing just for being upfront, being her personality. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that because you're going to be like that the whole game. So it's actually getting worse and worse more for Rachel than David at this point. David's using some comedy and one-liners and just says, I'm afraid of things. And then she's just kind of like, well, I'm sorry, I'm me. So it's a little hard to go at this point. Then the big question is, we start talking about idols. Are they out there? And, that's because everyone knows that David potentially has one, but he doesn't. I think it's clear the air that maybe idols actually are a thing out there. Who knows? We haven't heard anything as far as a clue being out there. We'll see if they actually do come up. It'd be pretty refreshing if they don't get in play right away. More so if when they maybe jumble up the tribe and everything, when they split them up. That would be very interesting. Because I don't like it when someone finds an idol on the very first day. It seems like it paves the way for them a little too easy. So let's pray that it is a while until the first idol is found. So at this point, David is, like I said, doing one-liners when he can speak. He's looking like he's actually in a really good spot, in my opinion. So we go and get to the votes. And in these votes, I think this is like the first time in a long time where it's very early on. You don't see one vote cast. You don't even get to see where Rachel and David are voting, because usually they show the people that are at least on the block of who's going to go, but they don't. So it's it's gonna be a tally. First one gets shown, it's David. Okay, then Rachel. So we got two votes, 1 and 1. So it's like, okay, we expected. And then we get Sunday. What? Why Sunday? And then we get Cece. Why are there 4 different people being cast out here? Are we just like, is there no strategy? There must be only like a couple of people that are communicating with each other, and a lot of people don't know what's going on. So as the votes get dispersed, David only receives 1 bloody vote. It's probably Rachel's. So in other words, they had no intentions of getting rid of her because Rachel had 5 and then Cece was out, which is 3. So they just wanted to scare David to get rid of his idol because he is someone that they can manipulate probably at this point because he's scared. He doesn't want to go home and he's insecure. You don't have to worry about him as a mental comp or even as a physical comp. Like, it's not looking good for him based on the very first day assessment. So Rachel is gone. And you know what? That's a bit of a shocker if you looked up the cast and on their bios, because she looked like she was going to be a very strong competitor. But I was worried from the beginning that her mouth might get the better of her, which it did. So it's at that time of this episode where we start to pick on the players of the day, of the episode. And so we're going to pick one from each tribe since we're at 2 tribes right now. And then maybe we'll go and talk about a few other players. But first, in my opinion, player of the day on Generation X is going to have to go to Sunday. Now, the only reason why I'm putting Sunday there is because I think that she's going to be a lot like Kathy from Season 4 and Season 8 All-Stars. I thought she was going to go in there and be completely out of her element and was going to be kind of like the mother role. But it seems like she's gotten herself in a really good spot with the boys, that she's going to be that pivotal part. She might be someone's what's her name? She's gotten herself in a good spot where she might be someone's ride or die because she's super non-threatening, but is a mother type, and that she could be comforting, and people think because she's an older lady that she's super wise. She just can come in there like Tina and sweep it from a guy. So hats off to her, Sunday, for, proving me wrong. I thought you were going to be the first one out. Now for the Millennials, a person that surprised me was actually Zeke. I didn't think Zeke was going to come in this game. Like, I knew that he was going to come in there pretty comical and be quite animated. However, when he stepped up and took a leading role, but also succeeded, say, guys, this is what we're going to do with the bamboo and make our roof, and then now let's get some fire going, and then makes fire. That is nothing but good for Zeke. Just because that, if you're going to lead, you got to succeed. Because if not, you're going to get ousted really quick. So good for those two. Now, if there's any honorable mention on what's going to happen next, Adam on the Millennials, I think, has a really good perception of what is going on. I think he's going to be really good, and I would really like for him, Zeke, Mia, and Hannah to all link up, and I think there'll be a strong core. And that is something that is really good, especially to battle against the Triforce. You need the common misfits to come together and take them out. And who knows, it'll be a lot like, probably be like Kageon, honestly. So we'll see how that goes. Now, for the Generation X side, like I said earlier about Tribal, I think now this puts David into a very cool, calm, collective mode that now people aren't going to vote for him. Because he just received one vote, which people could say that was Rachel, no big deal. Maybe he'll settle down just like Aubrey did after she had her freak out moment last season. And he'll probably go really far because he's going to be a sleeper. He's going to go right on the radar. But what's key for him now is, though, controlling where the votes go. It's good to know where the votes lie, but having a say in it is what's going to get you the $1 million, not just knowing. So we'll see how this pans out. Okay, so that wraps up the very first episode, and we're going to quickly talk about next time on Survivor. So it shows that there is a potential showmance brewing between Figgy and Taylor, is what we can assume, because all we see is Jay warning him, being like, showmances don't do good, man. You're going to get cast out very quickly. Like, it's not like Rob and Amber, from All Stars, where, that was the very first time a showmance really worked and it went all the way. Which brings me back to the whole notion, this is so much deja vu, just like Fans vs. Favorites 2, with Eddie and Reynolds, and then the other two ladies in their whole package. I feel like they're going to start going slowly, and it's up to the boys to start to throw them under the bus and get out of there, or the girls to get smart and throw them under the bus and get out of there. It's going to be a pair-off of which one is going to survive and which one's going to be left to die. Next is the most scary part. It seems like already we're going to have an evacuation on the next episode. It seems like someone has had a heart attack, and from what's being told, it's at a campsite, and you see purple buffs, which is Generation X. Who is it going to be? It's not David. You see him in the background there, and it's like, who's it going to be? Might be one of the bigger boys. It might be Paul. I have my eye on Paul being the person that could go based on that. Just because of his old age, typical heart attacks happen around that time, if you're going to have it. Or it could even be Brett. Like, he's a bit of a heavier guy. Who knows? But it also could be one of the kids, because irregular things happen. So we're gonna wait and see what happens next episode on that. I really hope this person turns out to be fine, whoever it may be. But until then, thanks for stopping by, guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll try and answer them next time for you guys. All right. Thank you.